My kids left me at the nursing home on a gray Tuesday morning. The building smelled faintly of disinfectant and overcooked vegetables, the kind of smell that clings to your clothes long after you leave. My daughter, Melissa, kept checking her phone while my son, Brian, carried my single suitcase through the automatic doors. "Dad, you'll be better off here," Melissa said with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Brian nodded like he was agreeing with a business decision instead of abandoning his father. "They have nurses, activities, people your age," he added.
People my age.
I looked around the lobby. A man in a wheelchair stared blankly at a muted television. A woman slowly folded and unfolded the same napkin at a nearby table. "I'm not that old," I said quietly. Melissa sighed. "Dad, we've been through this. You fell twice last month. We both have jobs, kids, responsibilities." Responsibilities. I remembered holding Melissa's hand when she was 5 and terrified of the dark. I remembered working double shifts to pay Brian's college tuition. But now I was the inconvenience. The receptionist slid a clipboard toward me. "Just a few forms," she said gently. Brian placed a pen in my hand. "Once you're settled, we'll visit," he promised. Melissa kissed the air near my cheek. "Love you, Dad." And just like that, they were gone. The automatic doors closed behind them with a soft hiss. I sat in the chair beside my suitcase, staring at the floor tiles, each one cracked slightly differently than the last. Funny how quiet abandonment is. No shouting, no dramatic goodbye, just silence. About 20 minutes later, the front doors opened again. I didn't bother looking up at first. I assumed it was another family dropping off someone they no longer had room for. Then a familiar voice said my name. "Mr. Harrison?" I looked up. A tall man in a navy suit stood at the reception desk holding a leather briefcase. Behind him, the receptionist gestured toward me. He walked over and extended his hand. "Good afternoon. I'm Daniel Carter, your lawyer." I blinked in confusion. "My lawyer?" "Yes," he said calmly, sitting down beside me. "Your children asked me to meet you here today." My stomach sank. So that was it. They hadn't just brought me here. They had planned it. Mr. Carter opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "I believe it's time we finalize the changes to your estate," he said. "Changes?" I asked slowly. He nodded. "After everything that happened this morning, I assumed you'd want to proceed." I studied his face, trying to understand. "Proceed with what?"
He slid a document toward me.
"The new will." My eyes moved across the first line. "I, Robert Harrison, being of sound mind." The rest of the page blurred slightly. Mr. Carter leaned closer and lowered his voice. "Your children were very clear when they contacted me last week," he said. "They believed it was time you moved into full-time care." Last week. So this hadn't been a sudden decision. They had planned it, discussed it, scheduled it. He continued speaking. "As you requested, the new will removes both Melissa and Brian as primary beneficiaries." My chest felt strangely light. Not angry, not even sad, just clear. "And everything instead goes to." He paused and turned the page. "The Harrison Foundation for Elder Care." I looked up at him. "That's the organization you asked me to create," he added, "to support seniors who were abandoned by their families." Across the room, the woman with the napkin was still folding it slowly. A nurse walked past with a tired smile. I thought about the empty chairs in this building, the people waiting for visitors who never came. "Good," I said quietly. Mr. Carter nodded. "There is one more thing," he added. "What?" He pointed toward the parking lot outside the glass doors. A black car had just pulled into a reserved space. "The director of a private assisted living residence is arriving shortly." I frowned. I thought this was where I was staying. He shook his head. "Oh no, Mr. Harrison." A small smile appeared on his face. "This place is temporary." He closed the folder and handed me the pen again. "You're actually moving into the facility you just purchased." I stared at him, the pen still in my hand. "You're telling me I bought a facility?" I asked. Mr. Carter nodded calmly. 3 months ago," he said. "You contacted me after your second fall. You told me something that stuck with me." I frowned slightly. "What was that?" He flipped through a few papers before reading a short note. You said, "If my kids ever decide I'm a burden, I want to make sure someone else's parents aren't treated the same way." The words hung in the air. I vaguely remembered that conversation. It had been late at night after Brian rushed me off the phone because he was too busy. At the time, I guess I already knew what was coming. "So, the property?" I asked. "Purchased under a trust in your name," Mr. Carter explained. "Fully renovated. Small, private, high-quality care. Only 20 residents." I looked around the nursing home lobby again. The cracked tiles. The flickering fluorescent light. The tired receptionist. "You deserve better than this place," he added quietly. Just then, the front doors opened again. A woman in her 40s walked in confidently, wearing a tailored gray coat and carrying a tablet. She spotted us immediately. "Mr. Harrison?" she asked with a warm smile. I stood slowly. "Yes." She extended her hand. "I'm Laura Bennett, Director of Harrison Gardens Assisted Living." I blinked. "Harrison Gardens?" She nodded. "The residence you purchase." Mr. Carter gestured toward the door. "Your new home." I grabbed the handle of my small suitcase. For a moment, I hesitated. Not because I wanted to stay, but because I realized something strange. My children thought they had left me here to disappear quietly. Instead, they had accidentally sent me to sign the papers that would cut them out of everything. Outside, the air felt fresh. Laura opened the car door for me. As we pulled away, I glanced back at the building. Through the glass doors, I could see another family walking in with an elderly woman between them. The same slow steps. The same forced smiles. The same lie. "You'll be better off here." Laura noticed me watching. "Hard place," she said softly. "Yes," I replied. The car turned onto the main road. "Your facility is about 20 minutes away," she continued. "Private gardens, walking paths, library, chef kitchen, and a full medical staff." I chuckled quietly. My kids thought they were sending me somewhere to wait for the end. Laura smiled. "Well, they were half right." "Oh, yes." She glanced at me through the rearview mirror. "You're about to start a whole new chapter." 20 minutes later, the car slowed as we approached a beautiful stone entrance surrounded by tall oak trees. A polished sign stood beside the gate. Harrison Gardens. Private Assisted Living. Flower beds lined the driveway. Large windows overlooked a garden where a few residents were sitting under umbrellas drinking tea. Nothing like the place I had just left. The car stopped. Laura turned to me. "Welcome home, Mr. Harrison." As I stepped out, Mr. Carter handed me one final envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Just something you asked me to prepare," he said. I opened it. Inside was a single letter addressed to two names, Melissa and Brian Harrison. At the bottom of the page was a short note. "Deliver after they ask about the will." I looked up at him. "What does it say?" Mr. Carter smiled slightly. "You wrote it." I unfolded the letter and read the first line. "Dear Melissa and Brian, you said I'd be better off here, and for once in your lives, you were absolutely right." Mr. Carter watched quietly while I finished reading the letter. For a moment, none of us spoke. The garden behind him was peaceful, birds moving between the oak trees, a couple of residents laughing softly at a small table near the fountain. It felt like another world. I folded the letter slowly and placed it back into the envelope. "Will they be upset?" Laura asked carefully. I gave a small shrug. "Probably," I said. But they weren't too worried about my feelings this morning. Mr. Carter adjusted his glasses. "They will likely contact me once they realize they're no longer beneficiaries," he said. "People tend to pay attention when millions disappear." I raised an eyebrow. "Millions?" He nodded. "After the property sales and investments we finalized last quarter, your estate is worth significantly more than they believe." I couldn't help but laugh. Brian always thought I was bad with money. Melissa once told her husband I'd probably spend my retirement watching TV and draining their savings. If only they knew. Laura gestured toward the building. "Would you like a tour?" "Yes," I said. "I would." We walked through the front doors together. Inside, sunlight poured through tall windows. There were bookshelves, comfortable chairs, a piano in the corner, and the smell of fresh bread coming from somewhere nearby. A woman knitting in a chair looked up. "New neighbor?" she asked cheerfully. Laura nodded. "Everyone, this is Mr. Harrison." The woman smiled warmly. "Well, welcome. Around here we actually like our residents." I chuckled. That's already an improvement. Laura showed me the dining room, the library, the medical wing, and finally the gardens in the back. When we stepped outside, I saw a small wooden bench under a maple tree. A brass plaque was already attached. I walked closer. "For those who are forgotten, may they find peace here." I swallowed hard. "You had that installed last week," Laura said quietly. "I remember," I replied. We stood there for a moment. Then Mr. Carter's phone buzzed. He looked down at the screen and sighed softly. "Well," he said, "that was fast." "Who?" I asked. He turned the phone toward me. "Brian calling." I wasn't surprised. They had probably just arrived home. Maybe Melissa asked, "Did Dad sign the papers?" Maybe Brian said, "Yeah, everything's handled." And then the lawyer called them back. I smiled slightly. "Go ahead," I told him. Mr. Carter answered. "Hello, Brian." Even from where I stood, I could hear the shouting through the phone. "What do you mean we're not in the will?" Mr. Carter waited patiently until Brian finished yelling. Then he spoke calmly. "As I explained, your father revised his estate plan this afternoon." More shouting. "What about the house? The investments?" Mr. Carter looked at me and gave a small nod. "They now belong to the Harrison Foundation for Elder Care." There was silence on the other end. Then Brian asked the question I knew was coming. "So, what does Dad get?" Mr. Carter smiled faintly. "He gets exactly what you wanted for him." He paused. "A better place to live." The line went dead. Mr. Carter slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Well," he said, "that conversation will continue later." I sat down on the bench beneath the maple tree. Residents walked slowly along the garden path. Someone inside started playing the piano. Laura looked at me. "Do you regret it?" I watched the sunlight moving through the leaves. Then I shook my head. "No," I said. "For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm exactly where I belong." Laura sat beside me on the bench for a moment. The breeze moved softly through the maple tree above us, and somewhere behind the building a group of residents began laughing loudly at something. It was the kind of laughter you only hear when people feel safe. "Most people who arrive here don't smile on their first day," she said. "I'm not most people," I replied. Mr. Carter checked his watch. "I should head back to the office soon," he said. "But before I go, there's something else you should know." I looked up. "What is it?" "The foundation," he said. "The Harrison Foundation for Elder Care. It's already operational." I blinked. "Already?" He nodded. "You asked us not to wait." Laura crossed her arms, curious. "What does the foundation do exactly?" she asked. Mr. Carter opened his briefcase again and pulled out a tablet. "Right now, it funds 3 things," he explained. He held up one finger. "First, legal assistance for seniors being pressured into giving up property or assets. Second finger. Second, relocation support for elderly individuals abandoned in underfunded nursing homes. Then the third, facilities like this one." Laura looked around the garden again, clearly impressed. "How many places like this are there, currently?" Mr. Carter said. 2. My eyes widened. 2. He nodded. "This one and another opening next year." I leaned back on the bench slowly. All those nights sitting alone in my house after Melissa stopped visiting. All those quiet dinners. All those phone calls that ended with, "Sorry, Dad, I'm busy." I guess I had done something useful with that time. Just then, Laura's tablet buzzed. She checked the screen and smiled. "Speak of the devil." "What?" I asked. She turned the tablet toward me. On the screen was the security camera feed from the front gate. 2 familiar cars were parked outside. Melissa's SUV. Brian's sedan. I chuckled. That didn't take long. "They're asking to come in," Laura said. Mr. Carter raised an eyebrow. "Your decision." I watched the live video feed. Brian pacing angrily. Melissa gesturing wildly with her hands. Even through the camera, I could practically hear her voice. "This is ridiculous."
Laura looked at me.
Should I let them in? For a moment, I thought about the years, the missed birthdays, the rushed phone calls, the way Melissa had kissed the air beside my cheek that morning. Then I stood up from the bench. Actually, I said, brushing off my jacket. Yes. Laura tapped the screen, and the gate slowly opened. Are you sure? Mr. Carter asked quietly. I smiled. Oh, absolutely. We walked back toward the entrance just as the front doors opened. Brian stormed in first. Dad, what the hell is going on? He demanded. Melissa followed close behind. You can't just cut us out like this, she said. The lobby fell silent. Residents nearby looked up from their chairs. Laura stood calmly beside me. Mr. Carter folded his hands behind his back. Brian pointed toward the building. You're living here while giving everything away to strangers? I looked at him for a long moment. Then I spoke calmly. They aren't strangers. Melissa scoffed. Oh, really? I nodded toward the garden outside. They're people whose families said the same thing you did this morning. Brian frowned. What are you talking about? I met his eyes. You told me I'd be better off here. Melissa crossed her arms. Because it's true. I smiled slightly. Yes. I gestured around the beautiful lobby. The sunlight, the gardens, the residents chatting peacefully. For once in your lives. I paused. You were absolutely right. Brian looked around the lobby like he had just walked into the wrong building. The polished floors, the sunlight pouring through the tall windows, residents drinking coffee and chatting like they were in a quiet hotel lounge instead of a nursing home. This place, he muttered. This isn't a normal facility. No, Laura said calmly beside me. It isn't. Melissa turned back to me, frustration written across her face. Dad, stop playing games, she said. You need to fix this. Fix what? I asked. The will. Her voice echoed through the lobby. You can't just give everything away because you're upset. I tilted my head slightly. Upset. Brian ran a hand through his hair. Look, maybe we handled things badly this morning, he said. But we were trying to help you. Help me? I repeated. Melissa nodded quickly. Yes. You fell twice. You needed supervision. I looked toward the garden outside where two residents were slowly walking along the path together. Do you know what you said when you dropped me off? I asked quietly. Neither of them answered. I continued. You said I'd be better off here. Brian shrugged. Well, yeah. I smiled faintly. And you were right. Melissa threw her hands in the air. That's not the point. It actually is, I said. Mr. Carter stepped forward slightly. Your father's estate decision is legally final, he explained. The Harrison Foundation now owns the majority of the assets. Brian turned toward him angrily. You're his lawyer. You're supposed to protect his family. Mr. Carter didn't flinch. I am protecting my client. Silence filled the room for a moment. Then Melissa noticed the plaque on the wall near the entrance. She walked closer and read it aloud. Harrison Foundation for Elder Care. Her voice dropped. You named it after yourself? I shook my head. No. I pointed toward the residents sitting nearby. I named it after people like them. One elderly man raised his coffee cup slightly, as if to toast the moment. Brian stared at me. So that's it, he said. You're choosing strangers over your own children? I walked slowly toward the large window, overlooking the garden. For a long time, I watched the sunlight on the trees. Then I turned back to them. You stopped being my children the moment you treated me like a problem to get rid of. Melissa's expression hardened. So what now? I gestured around the building. Now I live here. Brian scoffed. In a nursing home? Laura smiled politely. This isn't a nursing home. She walked over to a large framed blueprint hanging on the wall. This is the first location of a national network of private elder communities. Brian frowned. What does that mean? Laura turned to him. It means your father didn't just buy a place to live. She glanced at me with a grin. He started a movement. Mr. Carter added calmly. The foundation is already funding 2 additional properties. Melissa's eyes widened. You're expanding this? I nodded. There are thousands of people sitting in places like the one you left me in this morning. Brian looked suddenly uncomfortable. You're serious? Very. Melissa crossed her arms. So, you're just done with us? I thought about that question carefully. Finally, I answered.
No.
They both looked surprised. I'm not done with you, I continued. You're welcome to visit. Melissa blinked. Really? Yes. I smiled gently. Just like every other resident here. I paused. You'll have to sign in at the front desk.